People laughed at Phyllis Diller's outrageous hair and funny quips about her sluggish husband, Fong. But beneath the laughter was a woman who was hiding a lot of things. For more than 30 years, she drove to the same site every week, a place her followers never knew about. There was someone inside those walls whom she loved more than anybody else, and she could never talk about their condition on stage. The visit ended in 1993, and that's when the true pain started. Phyllis never stopped working, even when her heart stopped beating. This is because of what she kept from the world. On July 17, 1917, Phyllis Diller was born in Lima, Ohio. Her parents were older than most others at the time. Perry, her father, was 55, and Frances, her mother, was 36. That meant that when Phyllis was a tiny girl, she was often around older people in funerals. Most youngsters were afraid of death, but she was strangely interested in it. That odd ease with gloomy subjects would ultimately become the basis of her comedy. Phyllis turned away from religion early on, even though her family was Methodist and had German-Irish ancestry. She had a rough time when she was young, but instead of getting angry, she got hilarious. She would make jokes with her friends at Central High School in Lima while they weren't in class. Those little things were the beginning of something much bigger. The Great Depression in the 1930s ruined her family's finances. She started peddling newspapers to make ends meet, which helped her grow the tough shell she would need later in life. Her last name had been Triber, but it had changed generations ago, and she didn't even know it until she was an adult. She made up stories because she grew up in a quiet, lonely house. And soon, those stories began to sound like jokes. Phyllis was only 10 years old when she got into the Sherwood Music Conservatory in Chicago in 1927. She was quite better at playing the piano than other kids her age. She started performing professionally with orchestras by 1939. But believe it or not, she quit. Not because she wasn't good, but because she thought she would never be as excellent as her teachers. It hurt to make the choice, but she knew it wasn't the correct one. Things didn't get better throughout the Great Depression. Her family's money ran out in 1933, thus she had to leave Sherwood after 3 years. To stay alive, she took every job she could find. She later remarked that stopping music might have saved her. She had not failed. She had changed her course to something even greater. She went back to college in 1935, this time to pursue music education at Bluffton. But in 1937, she left again, this time to get married. She regretted giving up her goals for years, but comedy would find her nonetheless. Phyllis and her husband Sherwood relocated to Ypsilanti, Michigan, in 1940. He worked at a facility that made bombers. Things were tough. That year, on September 27, their son Peter was born. At the time, the country was in the middle of wartime rationing. Families could only get by on $25 a week. The stress of being a new mother and not having enough money made her depressed after giving birth. They traveled at least 8 times between 1940 and 1945, and they finally settled in California. Sherwood found a job at the Alameda Naval Air Station, but they were usually short on money. Phyllis was the one who kept everything running smoothly. She felt better when she listened to the radio as she cleaned. Those shouts and jokes sowed a seed. Sally, her second child, was born in 1944. At this time, Sherwood was often out of work, so Phyllis got a job as an editor for a newspaper. That event would help her later on in a big way. They almost lost their home in 1953, but instead of shattering her, it somehow became the start of everything. She was 37 years old and about to start her profession. In 1945, she had a son, and that was a tragedy. Some stories indicate that they called him Perry. Some others think he died without a name. 2 weeks later, he died. It broke her. Doctors said it was because he was born too early and the medical care at the time wasn't powerful enough to save him. They still lived in Alameda, but Sherwood had just lost his job. Nothing seemed certain. Phyllis, who was only 28 years old at the time, used her anguish to do something. She began to take part in plays in San Francisco. Acting provided her a way to cover her sadness. But the heartbreak didn't stop there. Not long later, she lost the baby. She would have 6 pregnancies over the next 10 years. Only 5 kids lived. She started writing again during this time, writing articles for only $2 apiece while disguising her sadness behind a smile. Phyllis had 3 children between 1946 and 1950, Suzanne, Stephanie, and another son named Perry. That made 5 children that were still alive. But even if her family got bigger, their money didn't. Sherwood turned down positions he thought were too low paying, even though he might have used the $10,000 inheritance to rescue them. They lived on food stamps and could barely buy powdered milk. Writing for minor papers brought about $15 to $20 a week for Phyllis. Life was hard. She had 5 kids under 10, no aid, and no one to turn to for help. But instead of breaking down, she made a joke out of it. Her future comedy would be full of anecdotes about men who sit down and mothers who are always busy. At the time, none of it seemed humorous. It felt like I was about to drown. Things became worse by 1952. They were kicked out of their home because they didn't pay $300 in rent. That year, Phyllis started getting a steady wage of $75 a week as a radio copywriter at Caro in Oakland. The job saved their lives. She made a 15-minute section called Phyllis Diller, the homely friend maker, which made fun of suggestions for housewives. The name was dumb, yet it let her speak. Sherwood had been pressing her to perform for 2 years, so she finally did. The first real show she did was at a hospital for veterans. She failed. While she played the piano, her patients yelled at her, but she didn't stop. She used the shame as fuel. That year, she also conducted her first stand-up show. Even when they had trouble paying rent and had to sell jewelry, she kept going. She didn't tell anyone how hard things truly were. That was when things changed. Phyllis played at the Purple Onion in San Francisco on March 7, 1955, when she was 37 years old. The crowd loved her. She didn't want to be glamorous like other women. She made fun of how she looked, how she cooked, and how she lived. She joked that her meal may kill you. Everyone was laughing so hard. It was supposed to be a short gig, but it grew into an 89-week run. The club made more than $100,000 off her appearances in less than 2 years, and all of a sudden, this exhausted mother of 5 was being taken seriously. She only made $100 a week, but by the next year she was on TV. She said that reading the self-help book The Magic of Believing eventually gave her the push she needed to be on stage. She had been a homemaker for 15 years when she found something specifically for her. She changed fully in 1956. She made a theatrical look that people would never forget. She wore a crazy horsehair wig, painted her face with too much makeup, carried a long cigarette holder even though she hardly smoked, and wore clothes that didn't match that made her look silly and smart. She did it on purpose. She was almost 40 and felt she had to be different. She didn't strive to seem pretty, instead, she made herself as ugly as she could and was proud of it. Her bookings went up by 40% right away. She began to show up on national television. She had more than 50 wigs, each costing between $50 and $100. Her famous cigarette holder was 12 inches long and fashioned of ivory. All of this became part of her story. But deep down, she was burying the anguish of a bad marriage. She used that anguish to make herself stronger. Phyllis's first comedy album, Like a Lampshade in a Whorehouse, came out on June 15, 1958. The title startled everyone, and several businesses wouldn't sell it. But it sold more than 50,000 copies in its first year. Her quips about Fawn, a fictional husband who was indolent, were not very subtle digs at Sherwood. She made the album in a modest studio in Los Angeles with only 20 other individuals. The jokes were quick and dirty. She spoke at a rate of up to 200 words per minute. By 1959, the album had made her $10,000 in royalties and got her TV deals. Fawn's beginning was also odd. She maintained it even though it was a mistake in a script, writing more than 1,000 jokes about him in the end. This album's success showed that women could be just as brave, humorous, and tough as any man on stage. She was on tour all the time by 1959. She played at more than 150 places, including the famed Blue Angel Club in New York. She made $25,000 and traveled 50,000 miles that year. 3 times what she made 4 years ago. She had a steel cabinet made just for her to hold 50,000 handwritten jokes, each on an index card and categorized by theme. After the shows, she would sit at her typewriter and create 100 new jokes every week. She worked so hard that she passed out from tiredness after a 48-hour drive. But she kept going anyhow. Something pretty strange happened on TV in 1961. On April 5, a woman came on the Jack Paar show and changed everything. She wasn't youthful, she wasn't polished, and she didn't look like a typical Hollywood beauty. She was 43 years old. Phyllis Diller was her name. She had 5 kids, her marriage had ended, and she had only been doing comedy for a few years at the age of 37. Most people would have given up, but she didn't. She stood under the bright studio lights with a scary wig on her head, a long cigarette holder in her hand, and a loud cackle that made others laugh or gasp. She didn't try to hide her problems. She made a joke out of them. She said she was ugly before anyone else could, and she talked about her messy family life in ways that made others laugh out loud. There was no other woman like her on TV. Not a single one. And even though she was scared and shivering so much that she could hardly hold the mic, she kept going. That one time she showed up didn't only get her recognized. It made her famous. More programs came to call. She was soon on the Ed Sullivan Show, and later comedians like Roseanne Barr would declare that she altered their life. People labeled her the ugly duckling, but she had suddenly become a star. In 1966, 5 years later, Phyllis took another enormous chance. Her debut sitcom was The Pruitts of Southampton, which aired on ABC. She acted like she was still rich when she was really broke, so no one would find out. The show was crazy. She once tried to cook a turkey in a washing machine. Paul Lynde and John Astin were 2 of the weird people who were on the show. In January 1967, the show changed its name to The Phyllis Diller Show. It only had 30 episodes and finished in April. The ratings were low. It came in 77th out of 91 performances. But even though it didn't work, it got her a Golden Globe nomination. And it made folks think of something else. Phyllis wasn't scared of failing. Not on TV, not in real life. TV Guide even said it was one of the worst shows ever. But instead of burying it, she kept coming back. She went on tour with Bob Hope even throughout the Vietnam War, helping soldiers laugh when they needed it most. At about the same time, she found a second home on TV game shows. She started appearing on the Hollywood Squares regularly in 1967. She was on the show 28 times between 1970 and 1980. She fired 4th punchlines from her little booth in the tic-tac-toe board that people will never forget. One of her most famous jokes was when she ran after a garbage truck and said, "Am I too late for the trash?" The driver said, "No, go ahead and get in." That was her magic trick. People laughed when she made fun of herself. People really liked it. She didn't act like a star. She was being honest. And that made her famous. It felt like a celebration behind the scenes of the show. She taped 5 episodes a day and became great friends with the other stars. Fans also got to witness a different side of her. She wasn't a good singer. She smoked a lot. She had 6 kids at home and didn't get much sleep. But she made it all funny. Eddie Murphy even claimed that her laugh made him giggle. And she wasn't kidding. Long before anybody knew her name, she was opening doors for women like Ellen DeGeneres. In 1968, she got her own variety show. The show was called The Beautiful Phyllis Diller Show and it started on NBC on September 15. It only had 13 episodes and finished in December. The show had music, comedy, and interviews all at the same time. Bob Hope, Goldie Hawn, and Norm Crosby were among of the people that came to see her. She sung even though she couldn't. That was Phyllis. She didn't care if it was flawless. She only wanted it to be fun. It got cancelled after 3 months because the ratings were dismal again. But somehow, this failure only made her more famous. Lady Gaga and other stars would subsequently be influenced by her daring outfits, big hair, and crazy performances. That year, she went on tour in Vietnam with Bob Hope again. In the animated movie Mad Monster Party, she also voiced the monster's partner. She was everywhere, even if the ratings didn't always indicate it. She didn't have a tremendous cinematic career in the 1970s, but she did have some great times. She played Mrs. Zero in The Adding Machine in 1969. The movie didn't do well at the box office, but critics were astonished by how serious and emotional she could be. She was in the Oscar-winning movie The Sunshine Boys for a short time in 1975 and in The Great Balloon Race in 1977. She was in A Pleasure Doing Business 2 years later. Around same time, she also became the lead in the Broadway show Hello Dolly, which opened on December 26, 1969. She was 52 years old and did 8 gigs a week. Few people knew that her home life was falling apart behind the scenes. Sherwood, her husband, had been diagnosed with a mental disorder in the 1950s and had left her to raise their 5 children by herself. She worked every night trying to make ends meet. But she kept going. She joined The Gong Show in 1976 and assessed silly acts while laughing at the craziness. She was also on Match Game PM. Her voice was everywhere, laughing, yelling, and playing, and she never stopped. She featured on The Muppet Show in 1979 and The Love Boat over and over again from 1977 to 1986. At the end of the decade, she had worked on more than 40 movies. In 1966, she made more money than Bob Hope on one of their movies. I must have dialed the wrong number since her timing was simply too excellent. She also put out an album. It came released in 1968 and was called Born to Sing. It wasn't a big deal. She laughed at her own voice. The songs were out of tune and full of jokes, but that was the point. People really liked it. She combined music with stand-up. She did all of her songs, such Satisfaction and Hello Young Lovers, in her own way and with a sense of humor. The CD did alright, but it helped her sell out performances on tour. What few people realized was that she made it while she was going through a lot of trouble. Her marriage had fallen apart. She didn't have any money. Sally, one of her daughters, was eventually diagnosed with schizophrenia, and for decades, Phyllis visited her every week without informing anyone. She smiled in front of other people. She was barely able to keep it together in private. That album got her a TV show in 1968. In 1972, she made light of psychic readings by voicing herself in the new Scooby-Doo movies. Her fans loved her. A lot of them were LGBT people who thought her bright colors and honest words were wonderful. She put out more than 10 albums. Each one seemed like a small act of disobedience. She changed into something different in the 1990s, a voice. She played the Mouse Queen in The Nutcracker Prince, a Canadian animated movie that came out in 1990. It was a huge flop, making only $1.7 million on a budget of $8.5 million. But her performance was quite good. Her nasty voice, which was full of laughter and evil glee, made kids giggle and parents grin. In 1998, she was in A Bug's Life, which brought in more than $363 million. Her voice was great in cartoons, but in real life she was sad again. Her daughter Sally was still in a group home, and by 1990, her son Peter had cancer. He passed away in 1998 when he was 53. She kept going on tour, smiling, and visiting hospitals without saying a word. She did something that had never been done before in 1984. She filmed a video about getting plastic surgery. A true home video, not just a prank. It was named Phyllis Diller's Home Video Guide to Plastic Surgery and cost $39.95. She talked about her nose job, facelifts, and other things in it. She claimed it wasn't just about looking better, it made her feel better too. She even joked that her doctor was so cheap he took off her jewelry. This wasn't simply amusing, it was also brave. No one would say they had surgery back then. The American Academy of Cosmetic Surgery gave her an award for being honest. People listened when she said she was the queen of plastic surgery. It was okay for her to talk about it. Joan Rivers even did what she did. She made her style into a company in 1985. She made her own wigs and weird clothing and sold them. She was making money off of jokes at 68. She sold wigs that looked like her crazy hair and clothes that looked like the ones she wore on stage. Bright, loud, and hard to forget. For years, she wore wigs every day since her own hair couldn't take the teasing anymore. This business gave her a lot of money, and it changed the way drag queens and LGBT fans perceived her. They saw her as a queen, not just a clown. At age 79 in 1996, she shocked everyone again. She played Gladys Pope, a colorful and funny cosmetics artist, in the serial opera The Bold and the Beautiful. She was in 11 episodes, and no one anticipated her to mix comedy and drama in such a unique way. People liked it. Most people didn't know that her health was getting worse. Her heart stopped in 1997, and by 1999 she needed a pacemaker. But she kept going. She never did. After that, in 1998, she did her last stand-up special. It was called Phyllis Diller, Still Out for a Laugh, and it was on NPR. She was 81 years old. Her voice broke. Her jokes about becoming older hit home more than ever. And behind the laugh, there was pain. It was the same year when her son died. But she didn't let others see her cry. She continued making people chuckle. Greg Barson was in charge of the special. And has stories from Roseanne Barr and other people. It was a goodbye without actually saying goodbye. She kept making cameos until 2007. Her body got fatigued, but her spirit never gave up. In 1939, Phyllis Diller got married for the first time. Back then, it felt like a normal love tale. On November 4, she and Sherwood Diller ran away together in Bluffton, Ohio. She had no idea that for the next 26 years, she would have to pretend that everything was perfect when it wasn't. Sherwood had trouble with agoraphobia and wouldn't keep a consistent work. That meant Phyllis had to do everything herself, like writing for newspapers, editing, and doing whatever else she could to make ends meet while raising 5 kids. One other child had perished as a baby. Even during World War II, Sherwood seldom showed up to work at a bomber production. She did everything by herself. She never let anyone know what was truly going on. She made up a persona named Fawn to make fun of her lethargic spouse. But the ache was real. She was hiding her gambling losses, emotional abuse, and quiet poverty behind the laugh. On September 3, 1965, the divorce happened. She didn't tell anyone how much it pained her until later. She got married again in less than a month. She married actor Ward Donovan on October 7, 1965, and it felt like a quick way to get away from her history. But this new chapter got even darker even quickly. It fell apart in just a few months. He drank too much, became involved in affairs, and made her feel alone again. She asked for a divorce after 3 months, but it wasn't official until 1975. At first, she didn't say anything about his cheating or the problems at home. She didn't want scandal to get in the way of her climb, but later she made fun of incompetent husbands on stage to hide her loneliness. The truth is that the first time it barely lasted 22 weeks. He was away more than he was there. And the silence that came after was even louder. Years later, something gentler came into her life. She met Robert Hastings in 1985. He wasn't her spouse, but he became everything she needed. They shared a big house in Brentwood until he died of cancer on May 23, 1996. At that time, she was 78 and had never married again. He told her in an interview that she was the love of his life. They would play gin rummy in the house, just the two of them, to get away from the anguish of her childhood. This time it was real after so many times of smiling through sadness. She never wanted to be legally tied to anyone again. That calm company was all they needed. But Phyllis's problems in her personal life didn't stop there. Sally, her daughter, was born in 1944, but by the 1950s, something was definitely amiss. Sally's schizophrenia took over her life, and Phyllis attempted for years to help her at home. Around 1960, she made the painful choice to put her in an institution. Her spouse wasn't emotionally stable either, which made things even worse, but she never talked about any of this in her stage routines. She kept up the facade of a happy housewife. Fans didn't find out what she had been carrying until much later. Sally died at the age of 49 in 1993. Phyllis struggled to keep cheerful when she lost another child. July 4, 2002, was supposed to be a day of celebration, but it turned into something else. At the age of 54, her daughter Stephanie died of a stroke. Phyllis had helped Stephanie raise her 3 kids after they got married in 1973. And now, all of a sudden, she was saying goodbye. She kept working. She didn't take the time to mourn in public. But beneath her busy schedule and big wigs was an 84-year-old mother who had already buried her son Peter in 1998 and lost Sally in 1993. Now she was striving to stay strong after another hit. She had previously gone through a different kind of heartache in 1945. Her baby boy died 2 weeks after he was born. That happened after she had a miscarriage, which had already upset her a lot. In 1940, she and Sherwood welcomed Peter, and in 1944, they had Sally. But nothing could have prepared her for losing a baby. For years, she didn't talk about it. She ultimately told the truth in her 2005 memoir, Like a Lampshade in a Whorehouse. In Lima, Ohio, he was buried without a word. Phyllis died in 2012, and by then, 4 of her 6 children had already died. That's the kind of anguish that no joke could make better. Perry, her youngest child, was born in 1950. He had dyslexia, which made it hard for him to learn in school and at home. Perry's reading issues felt like another mountain on top of Sally's illness and all the losses. But he did it. He worked hard, created a career in business, and eventually became the one in charge of his mother's affairs. He was the light in a storm of despair. Perry stood with her through it all and outlived her, showing that not every chapter had to end in sadness. The 1950s were not at all glamorous. She was living in a trailer park with 5 kids and barely earning rent. Sherwood had failed again, and the family had to move out more than once. She did stand-up comedy in laundromats to keep her mind off things. In 1955, when she was 37, she finally got a break and performed at the Purple Onion in San Francisco for 89 weeks in a row. Not dreams, but desperation made her go on stage. But she continued going because she read a self-help book called The Magic of Believing. By the 1970s, she had been divorced twice and was almost out of money. She didn't say anything, but the court papers told the story. Ward said he only made $500 a month, while she made $100,000 and supported the whole family. She went on rigorous tours, sometimes doing 200 gigs a year. People laughed at her self-deprecating quips about Fong, but she was on the verge of losing everything. In 1979, she won a $5 million case over song rights, which helped things get back on track. The men left a mess behind, and she kept building by herself. She also literally rebuilt herself. She began a long journey through plastic surgery in 1972. She had done 15 surgeries by 1990. The first facelift almost killed her and left her paralyzed for a short time. Over time, she had her nose altered, her breasts made smaller, her cheeks filled in, her eyes elevated, and even tattooed eyeliner. She said that no 2 parts of her body were the same age anymore. She made it funny in an interview in 1993. But the truth was that the procedures weren't only about looks. They were like shields. In 1999, one of them almost killed her when her heart stopped and she had to have a pacemaker. She became an author in 1981, when she was 64. She published The Joys of Aging and How to Avoid Them, which made people laugh instead of being afraid of getting older. Like her other books, it sold well. She wrote with her pen like she spoke, turning grief into something that could breathe. She was also still getting over her divorce and attempting to keep up with a world that was changing. She disclosed something fresh after she left the comedy stage in 2002, when she was 85. She was an artist. Her house became an art gallery. She had small parties, sold her art, and smiled as guests snapped selfies next to a piece in her entryway that was lit up by a spotlight. Some of her works went for $5,000. Her grand piano was even sold at an estate sale in 2013. It took her 15 years to finish one painting. Even after breaking her back in 2007 and having to cancel a 90th birthday appearance on The Tonight Show, she never stopped making things. She fought several fights in silence in her last years. She had a heart attack in 1999. Her heart had ceased beating. She was paralyzed by the side effects of her medications, but she got better via therapy. In 2005, she was still doing voice work for series like Family Guy, and her trademark laugh could be heard on TV. She didn't give up, even after despair, heart problems, and previous scars caught up with her. On May 15, 2012, she made her last public appearance when she received a Lifetime Achievement Award in Lima, Ohio. She smiled even though she looked weak. She passed away at the age of 95 in her Brentwood home on August 20, 2012. Her heart finally stopped beating. Her boss reported she died calmly in her sleep, with a smile on her face. They burned her body and threw her ashes into the sea. It was easy and free, exactly like her energy. Afterward, the world learned that she had been hiding serious sadness, chronic pain, and losses that were too much to endure. But the world saw people laughing. She wanted it that way. She let you be loud, silly, honest, and broken all at once.